Welcome to Healthy Births, Happy Babies, where we share tips, tools, and stories grounded in natural childbirth and parenting principles, so that instead of feeling overwhelmed and confused during this exciting time in your life, you feel safe, supported, and empowered in your childbirth and parenting journey. And now, here's your host, Dr. Jay Warren.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies. I'm Dr. Jay Warren. I'm the prenatal and pediatric chiropractor here at the CAP Wellness Center. And today's guest is Kimberly Johnson. She's been on the podcast many times. You may remember her from past episodes where she's talked about pelvic floor health and postpartum care, the fourth trimester. It's actually the title of her upcoming book. We're going to be talking a little bit about that. But today's episode topic is, why is sex so hard after baby? And it's something that Kimberly works with clients on a daily basis around that as a sexological bodyworker, and has a lot of wisdom to share to make that part of the postpartum transition a little easier. It can be a really stressful topic for partners, and she's here to share her wisdom about how to ease that much better. So before I switch over to our conversation, though, let me, as always, take a word from our sponsor, the CAP Wellness Center.
Hi, I'm Amanda, the Director of Yoga at CAP Wellness Center in Encinitas, California. Prenatal yoga is beneficial to women on so many levels and so many ways. A few of my favorites are that it helps reduce stress, to calm our mind and slow our breath down. It gives us a chance to connect with our babies, and it helps to build some strength and stamina that we're going to need for the labor and birth of our children. We have amazing teachers here at the center, styles ranging from prenatal vinyasa to gentle, deep stretching classes, and we even have a meditation class to give you a chance to really calm your mind and connect with your baby on a deeper level. I'm wishing you all healthy births and happy babies. Namaste.
All right, let me introduce our guest and remind you regular listeners of who she is, and then we'll switch over to a conversation. Kimberly Ann Johnson is a Somatic Experiencing trauma resolution practitioner, a certified sexological bodyworker, a doula, postpartum care advocate, and a single mom. She works at the intersection of birth, sex, and trauma, specializing in birth injuries, birth trauma, and sexual healing. She created a process called the Birth Rehearsal to help women somatically prepare for birth. She's the author of an upcoming book from Shambhala Publications called The Fourth Trimester, A New Mother's Guide to Healing Your Body, Balancing Your Emotions, and Restoring Your Vitality. They'll be released in November of 2017. Through sexological bodywork, hands-on and hands-in work, together with somatic experiencing and birth story medicine, she helps women find full health and recovery during postpartum in their mind, body, emotions, sexuality, and spirituality. She helps women discover their new identities as mothers. So now, let me switch over to my conversation with Kimberly. Hi, Kimberly. Welcome back.
Hi, Dr. J.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great.
Good. I'm glad to have you. I'm doing really good, too. I'm glad to have you back. This is another episode. We're going to be talking about why sex is so hard after baby. But before we jump into that, Kimberly, I want you to tell us and update us about your book. Each time we've had you on, it's been at a different stage, but we just heard that it's completed and getting ready to be published.
Yeah, I've been on the show since it's been in like the conception phase, the preconception, the conception, the pregnancy, and now I've birthed it, but I haven't quite reached the postpartum period yet, and it's going to be published in November this year by Shambhala Publications. So I'm pretty excited that project is, at least that phase of the project is complete.
Yes, congratulations. So yeah, it's fourth trimester will be available in November 2017. So we'll have you on to talk more about that when it is actually birthed into the world. It's birthed from you, but the publishers will send it to us soon, right?
That's right. Yeah, and it's birthed from me, but I also feel like it's birthed from you, from all of the conversations I've had and women I've worked with and mothers I've talked to. And I think of it as a collective need that somehow I got the cosmic tap to have to be the one to to birth it all the way through.
Well, in advance, we appreciate you that did so. And I know it'll be a great resource based on the previous conversations we've had. And I know today's conversation will be the same, be very empowering, enlightening, and let's jump right into it. So this is your wheelhouse, obviously. This is what you're working a lot with women. So tell us, why is sex so hard after baby for women?
So, I mean, it's this amazing thing with postpartum overall. When women have babies, it is an opening. It's an invitation. It's everything that's unresolved rises to the surface, and we're in a maturing process. And as we mature, who we are emotionally, who we are physically, who we are spiritually, and who we are sexually evolves. But our cultural conversation around sex doesn't really include that evolution, partially because our cultural conversation around sex is pretty limited, and it's mostly driven by porn. Even when people don't watch porn, porn itself is determining what we think about pubic hair, is determining what we think about how genitals are supposed to look. It's what we think about how orgasm happens and how climax happens. So we're getting a lot of sex education, even indirectly, just in the milieu of what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, what we're supposed to want, what sex even is. A lot of clients come to me and they're like, can we just talk about like what is sex? Like, what is it even? And so most people, when they mean sex, when they say sex, they mean penetration. And postpartum is a notorious time when women don't really want penetration. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And those reasons partially are physical. So if there's any pain, if there's any kind of an injury, then pain can get associated with that part of our body, with our genitals, with our pelvis. And we all have different relationships to pain and how that gets embedded in our body as a defense strategy, or, you know, that area is painful. I just don't want to touch it. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to imagine what it feels like. And so that part of our body gets associated with pain. And then some women want to push through that. You know, their mind is saying, you know, well, maybe, and not only mind, like doctors suggest, magazines suggest, you know, if you, like basically just warm yourself up. Like, oh, it might be painful at first, but then it's not going to be painful later. And sort of the more pain that you push through, the more your body gets that ingrained that this is something that's uncomfortable. And so that's one part of it. Another part of it can be the birth experience itself. That in the birth experience, say a woman has had a cesarean birth, the body itself did not complete a vaginal birth. And we are meant to birth vaginally. Not that there's anything wrong with a cesarean birth when it's necessary, but just the way that our physiological circuitry is wired is that the baby that we've carried for close to, 9 months, 10 months is going to be pushed out through our vagina. And when it isn't pushed out through the vagina, oftentimes that part of our body, our vagina, is confused. So I've worked with a lot of women after cesarean births where sex is not appealing to them, penetrative sex. And again, since most people think of sex as penetrative sex, if they're not having penetration, then to them, they're not having sex. And they're also shut down to other ways of relating that might be sexual or sensual or intimate or connected, but that aren't that act. They feel like they're failing if they're not offering that specific way of connecting. And I've worked with a lot of women who have, even while I've been working with them, had uterine contractions that they never had during their birth experience. It's a way of their body completing that process that never happened. It never happened vaginally. I've also had women where when I just say the word completion, their vagina opens up. A lot of women have the muscles get really, really tight post-birth, and they're confused. I had a cesarean. Why is my pelvic floor so tight? What did my pelvic floor have to do with this? Well, their body's confused. It doesn't understand why something would come in if nothing ever came out. So there's this possibility that there's something in the birth field that shifted a dynamic in the body and in the nervous system that then made sex seem scary, seem painful, seem unappealing. The same goes for dynamics between couples that can be imprinted during birth. If a woman feels abandoned by her partner, if a woman feels like she didn't get the support she needed from her partner, a whole number of ways that a certain dynamic doesn't feel protected. And then in that birth sphere, which is very similar to a sexual sphere, when we allow ourselves to go into that altered state, an oxytocin-driven, sometimes almost psychedelic state, that is similar to the sex realm. So when we start to go into those similar hormones again, a similar place where we're out of control in that area, those earlier dynamics can get stirred up.
So,
and then,
go back there for a second there around like with the birth experience, but then also the dynamic of the couples there. Are you saying that with even that, like in the labor into birth, there can be imprinting that can create either separation or issues?
Yes.
Between a couple?
Like I'll give you an example. Like I had a client who was having a second home birth. Her first birth was pretty fast, a couple of hours. I mean, very fast. And her second birth, she was at home, she was laboring in the tub, and she had a 2-year-old already. So her partner was with her 2-year-old. And the doula came, and there wasn't even time for the midwife to get there. And her partner just came to the tub for like the last 2 minutes when she actually pushed the baby out. From an external perspective, it looked like everything was great. She had a 45-minute birth. She had no pelvic floor damage. And everybody kept telling her, what an easy birth. That was so easy. You're made to do this. But from her perspective, it was still a birth. And it wasn't that easy. It's never easy to give birth, no matter how long or short it is. And she felt sexually disconnected from her husband after that birth because he was with her child instead of her. Now, did she want to feel that way? No. Did she rationally have a million reasons not to feel that way? Yes. But that is how she felt from the inside. Her third birth, she decided to have in a hospital because she had changed countries, moved countries. And she was aware of that dynamic. And so she chose to have her husband in the shower with her. She labored in the shower the whole time. It was a longer birth, a little bit longer. It was about 4 hours. And she told me that the minute that the baby came out, that all she wanted to do was passionately kiss her husband. Because and that was her, like, after, her baby came up to her chest, and then, like, that was her first instinct, because she really felt he was there doing it with her. Just like they made the baby, he was there fully present, completely involved, standing in a hot shower. The guy his face was beet red. He was wearing Bermudas, but he was there and involved the whole time. And I mean, I could give you so many examples of ways that either connection was forged, like that partnership got forged stronger and there's more sexual connection and more desire, and then ways where there's a separation that happened during that time.
That's fascinating.
And, on the same line is that what women often notice after they have babies is that even if they felt that what they liked sexually or what worked for them sexually before having a baby, they realize actually that's not what they want anymore. So it's confusing to them because they're like, wow, I used to think that I liked that, but looking back on it, I was tolerating it, or I was performing sex. I wasn't being in my sex. And then comes the next question of like, well, then who am I sexually? Then what do I want? And what is a sexy mom? Like, maybe I know what a sexy single person is, or a sexy fiance is, or a sexy girlfriend looks like for me. But what does it mean to be a sexy mom? And we've got, an inheritance of puritanical culture here where the Virgin Mary is one of the main mother archetypes. And that's a mother who didn't have sex to have a baby. Now, that's not really what it means. Like, a virgin means someone who's whole unto themselves. And so really the metaphor is this person who is so full impregnates herself with life and is able to give birth. But the way that it's interpreted in the Christian tradition is that this person gets pregnant spontaneously, miraculously. And so if you look outside ourselves, other cultures, there's many more representations of a feminine archetype. Here we've got a complete separation between being a mother and being a sexual person. And I see that being more challenging for women. I see it being much less. Men may have that deeper down, but most of the women, and I know I'm being heteronormative here, my practice tends to be heteronormative, but even within a same-sex relationship, there's someone who usually has the more masculine role. And also in this case, one of the people is the one that's birthing. So the one who's not birthing is in that other role because they didn't go through that physical experience. So it's a completely different transformation. So we're really asked to look at what we want and how we want it, and we don't really have a lot of light posts along the way, because what we thought was good, a lot of women say to me, well, the way that my husband does sex doesn't really work for me. And I'm like, well, but what do you mean? Like, aren't you doing sex together? Like, aren't you creating sex? And they'll just be like, well, he really needs it this way. And I'm like, well, what is this way? Well, he needs it like hard and fast. And it's like, well, that's one flavor out of so many ways of connecting. And the other thing about women's arousal and how just the physiology of it works is it takes us 35 to 45 minutes to get full engorgement and full arousal. And so many people have never even had sexual engagement for that long. Like, they're like, what would we even do for 45 minutes? So that tells me that even before this person has had a baby, they don't even have a reference of what fully aroused sex feels like. And so then to complicate that, you might have some physical pain, you might have some body image stuff going on, you might have, you definitely have, emotional shifts happening. And like in that space to be able to communicate a new way of relating that you might not even know is really challenging. But it's also a huge opportunity. And I think, so far I've talked about what all the challenges are to it, and maybe you can chime in here and then we can talk about like some of the ways that we can work with it.
Sure. As you were describing all this, do you find the women that are coming to you for help in this area are able to articulate it in that way? Or is it more of, all I know is that sex is different and it doesn't feel right to me. And then you're able to, through your questioning exploration, go into, okay, well, you're redefining yourself as a woman, and what does sexy mom look like? Because that's a totally different thing. Or are women coming with those ideas already of like, I have to like re-identify myself or create a new version of myself, and I'm having trouble doing that? Or are they just kind of then stuck in, right, I know I'd like to have sex again, but I just know I don't, and what's wrong with me?
Yeah, mostly when people come to me, they're wondering what's wrong with them and why they don't want X. Instead of asking the question, like they're trying to fit themselves into something rather than changing the something.
Right.
So instead of, actually, there's nothing wrong with me, this is where I'm at right now, and from this place, what sounds good? It's like, oh, I must be damaged, totally effed up, and so I should want this thing. Because we're bombarded with it. It's everywhere. Doctors are telling us that orgasm is good for us. Magazines are telling us that. Our girlfriends are talking about it. And women are paranoid because they're like, they hear that that's what happens postpartum. They don't want that to happen to their relationship. They feel under a lot of pressure, like, oh, that's like men need that intimacy. And if I don't give that to my partner, then, I'm not being a good partner. And so there's like all these layers of pressure built up over it, rather than a real acceptance of the transition time, and that there is a way to be sexual and to connect sexually that can be satisfying to both people, that doesn't have to be the sex that you had before. And it also doesn't have to be hard and fast penetrative sex, that there could be a whole other, and it can be that sometimes, but that's a choice, that's not just a default mechanism.
Right. And really kind of like re-examining or redefining what sex is, or maybe even not redoing it, but maybe doing it for the first time, because being kind of unconscious to, okay, I guess this is what sex is. And then the birth experience or motherhood or going through this transition allows a woman to examine it and then say, okay, well, wait, what is this? And I was tolerating it. I didn't really like that. And then working with the partner to, redefine and re-explore.
Right. And, I always find that the best way to start the conversation, if it's true, is to say, to be very transparent. I really want intimate connection with you, and I'm having a really challenging time finding my way there. What can we do? And talking about it openly, because it tends to be something that just slips into scripts. So women just say, oh, I'd have low libido. And every time someone tells me that in my office, I just reject it. Same with touched out. I'm just touched out. Like, touch from a partner is not like having your nipple being tugged on by a kid or by like constantly, carrying somebody. If your partner is touching you in that way, then you have to educate them on what it is that you like. But another thing that women do, like men, we need to set, and again, this is heteronormative, but this is the majority of my clients. We need to set men up for success. So rather than this thing that sex is something that men ask women for, and then we decide as gatekeepers if we're going to give it to them as a gift or not, we need to change that about sex is something that we receive from, and that is something that, instead of being the thing that exhausts us or is on the list of like one more thing we've got to do, it's the very battery pack that we plug into that gives us energy to continue through our day, through our week, to maintain connection while traveling. And that's something, I get really frustrated with my clients sometimes when they're like, oh, or people call me and they've got like terrible incontinence. And then they say, I tell them, okay, well, this is how I can work with you. And this is what's going into it. And then their response is, I have to talk to my husband. And I'm like, okay, I sort of want to be like, well, can I talk to your husband? Because how important is your intimate life to your husband? Because if you're wetting your pants all the time without wanting to, and you feel insecure about the functioning in your pelvis, you're not going to feel free, uninhibited, and like exploratory in the bedroom. So it's all interconnected of how we're caring for ourselves, how we prioritize our pelvic health, and our ability to engage and communicate about that engagement. And then we just call it, oh, I've got low libido. And many women come to me saying that. And then when I work with them, they realize, oh, actually, I was in pain before. And I was avoiding that pain, but I didn't even realize I was in pain. And that's why I was avoiding it.
So it's used as a default as kind of a defense to not have to enter into it.
Right. Because it's the only language that we have.
Right.
Like, either low libido or I'm touched out. And that seems to be something that like can be a defense against the partner, because most partners don't want to be assholes. So they're not like, they don't want to be like, well, give it to me anyway. But like, we had the episode for men on how to get the sex they want after birth. And a lot of that has to do also with men being able to stand in their desire and state what they want and then offer conversation around it. There's also this stereotype that men are visual and women need emotional connection first, and men need touch in order to connect emotionally, and women need emotional in order to connect sexually. But like, we need to take that apart and have it be more individual, but also, again, not have touch be this thing that someone has to earn from you.
So meaning like going back to like kind of the gatekeeper and deciding whether or not I'm going to gift it or not.
That's right.
Right. In a co-creation process.
Yeah. And really, really being honest. Like, maybe it's hard to get really honest because maybe there's other things maybe there's resentments, maybe there's other things that are playing into it. And a lot of times I find that people just don't even really know, but the conversation's not happening. So they might be able to know if they would open up the conversation, but there's so much shame around it. There's so much fear, like, about being desired or not being desired. There's so much fear about, well, then what's next? If I do have this conversation, then what do I do? That the conversation just doesn't happen. And then people come to me 3 years postpartum and they've had sexual interactions twice. And it's like, that's a long time to be in an intimate relationship and not have an open dialogue or an open conversation around what's happening.
Right. So how do you recommend to either a woman or just generally to couples to start that conversation? What's the best way of starting it?
I think the best way of starting it is just being really honest about, the best way to start any conversation is always to talk to another person about what it is you appreciate about them and what it is that's going well. And I think having a conversation, I talk about this in my book, that's like, having daily check-ins that have nothing to do with sex, perhaps, that's just like, how are you? How are you as a person? How are you doing as a mom? And conversely, how are you doing as a dad or a second mom? And then how are you doing as a partner? And then how are we doing? How are we doing? Right. What's the we that's separate from this parenting project that we're doing?
And then going into, maybe not jumping right then into the definition of what sex is and how you want it and everything, but really kind of putting it out there of like, all right, this is what I'm feeling and this is what I'm wanting. And then making sure you've created a safe space for that to be explored.
Yeah. And, saying what you want. It's okay to say what you don't want, but women really get stuck in that of like, I don't want this, I don't want that, that doesn't work with me, don't touch me here kind of thing. And like really saying, I think I would like to explore I think I would like to explore this. And one thing that often needs to be put on the table and this is also a crucial point in our development where we realize that we're not responsible for anyone else's orgasm. So women really feel like, oh, I have to get my partner off. So I have to, he's going to get blue balls. He's going to get so frustrated. It's my responsibility to provide him with this escape, this climax, this whatever. And that's simply not true. We're all responsible for our own orgasm. So this is where we have to get really honest too about like our own martyr tendencies of like, oh, well, I'll just give that away even though I don't really want to do it. And as a partner, you know what that feels like when someone's giving you something just because they're, okay, it might feel physically good, but it's not satisfying. Like you don't want a blowjob from someone who's just giving it to you because they feel like they have to. Right. You want it from someone who's turned on by it also and who is, wants to connect with you. So it's like really getting honest about that and starting in it. And a lot of it has to do with slowing down. Like the postpartum time is just a slow rhythm. And so everything needs to be slower. And also, because postpartum is so misunderstood and people think that postpartum just means depression And therefore, if you're not depressed, or even if you are, that there's something wrong with you, rather than this period of time that women really need a lot of support as a partner. If you want to, and not even as a partner, as a woman. I mean, I just worked with someone yesterday, and my homework for her was like, she was talking to me about wanting to be more sexually connected with her partner. And I was talking to her about like having coffee by herself for a half an hour a day, because she's a full-time stay-at-home mom and she never has time to herself. Well, and she says she's touched out. Well, of course she is. She's just has no sense of personal and physical autonomy right now. She needs to have that before she has that too. And she's like, well, when I'm with my husband, like I just want him to give me a massage, or I just want him, and a massage, can be sexual connection, can be sensual connection. But I think that the amount of time she would need from transition into how she's feeling at any given moment and entering into that space with her partner would change if she felt like she had any time at all for herself. And I think the same goes for a lot of, when men become fathers, the provider protector genetics kick in, and men start to work harder and grind themselves, and and the pressure is higher. And in that case also, sex becomes like a pressure reliever, rather than, maybe like every couple hours throughout my day, I could just send my partner like a heart emoticon, just to let her know I'm thinking about her. Just so that like by the time the end of the day comes, it's not such a radically huge difference between what I've been doing during the day and then like getting in bed with my wife. Like I find that true connection has to happen, or we want to down-regulate our systems before we start entering into a sexual interaction, or it gets complicated, because we can perceive in the other person that we're trying to deal with our stress through that interaction, and that doesn't actually land well, especially for women.
Right. Well,
so as a woman, we also need to advocate for ourselves, to have time for ourselves. Like I recommended here in San Diego, we've got the YMCA, where there's an hour or two of free childcare a day that women can have. And, it gives you time to exercise if you want. You can go hang out at a cafe if you want. You can meet up with a friend at the YMCA. But like, it's important to have individual space if you want to be able to engage with your partner and feel yourself as separate from only your mom identity.
Right. Well, in our last couple moments here, Kimberly, like, what do you think is the major take home you'd like women to have about this conversation? Either reiterating something that we already talked about, or, something new that we didn't get to yet.
I want women to know that sex and connection and intimacy, which are possibly three separate things and possibly three things that are, interconnected, can actually be the battery pack that provides the energy for mothering or for being a working mom, and that it's okay to radically shift what you want or how you do it. And also, if it just sounds mystifying, like, yeah, I can see that probably a lot of people are nodding, like, yeah, that's really how I feel, but I just don't know what to do. That there are professionals out there. I teach an online course on spirituality and sexuality, and specifically on women's sexuality. There's, even a holistic pelvic floor PT could help you with some of this. The Sexological Bodyworkers. There are ways to enter into this conversation that will actually give you a more full expression of your sexual self, a richer connection with the inherent power that most women know lies within their own sexuality.
Right. And I'll make sure that all of those links you just mentioned are available for our listeners. Obviously, we want to link to your website, but then also to your online course. So it's a way of people participating and diving in with you, as well as soon your book will be available so they can connect that way. So Kimberly, thank you again for being here. It's always a pleasure talking with you. It's always so enlightening and brings up new topics for our listeners to dive into and hopefully get support with, so that this postpartum transition time can just be that much easier and actually exciting and a new beginning rather than it's something to endure. So thank you for sharing your time.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you for joining us today. For more information about this episode and other natural childbirth and parenting topics, please visit us at capwellnesscenter.com or message us on our Facebook page with any questions you might have. We here at the Cap Wellness Center look forward to helping you and your family be as happy and healthy as you can be.